Thank you, Alex and Michael, for having us, and thank you all for coming out for a really going to be a lively conversation about photography and Alana's incredible exhibition. And I am going to welcome us one more time to the Leica Gallery for part of a celebration through the art of dialogue of Alana Perino's Aperture Portfolio Prize. So congratulations again. And we work together on some really exciting topics that come up and questions from this body of work that's around you. We opted to not have a PowerPoint so that we can, gaze around the room and pull in images in our dialogue. And I also want to say that Alana, one idea that came up with not having a PowerPoint is that Alana brought this beautiful portfolio box of the larger body of work, Pictures of Birds. So the first question I would like to ask you, Alana, is about the visual language that you're setting up, especially with these images that are an edit, a pretty tight edit from a much larger body of work that will evolve into a book one day soon, I hope. And I think that is the plan. And yeah, there's some, you're setting up a language that's more in the idiom of, I think, poetry, where there's like certain gestures or certain figures that repeat. There's a very seemingly matter-of-fact title. We have Pictures of Birds, and we see that there's, some figures in an aquarium, and there's some people that maybe are reappearing, although we can't really tell because we don't always get people's faces. There's figurines, there's seashells, there's palm fronds. So what is happening? How did this collection of muses come to you?
Thank you. First of all, for the question and also for being here. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, thank you to Aperture. Yeah, so let me start with the things that are in the room and the people that are in the room. Okay, so a lot of the pictures are of my father, first of all. I'm looking at one of my father right now. I began this work really taking photos of him. He was probably my first muse as a photographer, not only within this project, but perhaps within my artist practice. And I was photographing him and thinking about him and myself. I think part of the reason that I loved photographing him was because we look so similar. I think in that way that, I was always thinking, oh, he looks so much like me in that way that like children have that anachronistic feeling that parents look like them instead of the other way around. But as I get older, I look more and more like him. And as he got older, he used to say that he looked more and more like his grandfather all the time. And as I was photographing him, I was photographing other things around the island, and other things began to look like him as well. Oh. Things like egrets and certain fish and plant species. He was a gardener. He loved shrubs for some reason. Shrubs were his thing. I don't know who loves shrubs. My father loved shrubs. Did he have one of
those like shrub trimmers?
He did. He actually once had a shrubbery.
Oh, wow.
I'm not kidding. He did. So I photographed the things that looked like him, which also in turn looked like me. And certainly the language in that way became repetitive, I think. All of these things that are photographed, that are seen, the objects and the people are all related to me insofar as they were all on one island where my father lived, and all the people are related to me, not necessarily through blood, but certainly through a family, through a kind of extension of family, a spiritual family. And in this way, the repetition almost felt generational in the way that there's a cycle to how we inherit what we look like, not only in how we grow up and age and eventually die and decay, but also in the ways that our bodies decompose and become other things and spread out into the ecosystem.
Well, that is a good and profound like touch point to bring in the place specifically and name it, and talk a little bit about um, you know how these photographs are telling a story of like people's relationship to place, even though I think through your lens and through the way you photograph and then print and install these images, and we'll talk about that as well, there's, I think, a real criticality toward the place that your father and other family, stepmother, sister, niece, who appear in these photographs, like how they um, basically are in Longboat Key, Florida. And there are these sort of poetic registers within how you crop your images and how you're presenting something that's not quite social documentary. It's more in a surreal kind of dream, like generational life, death, like, how are we sort of a visual language of symbols of relation to each other. But we're also in a barrier island that is mostly populated by luxury living. And I feel like you're approaching this place in a way that is like eyes wide open about climate change, about development, about rising inequality in the United States. The gated community is part of the story of the Black Lives Matter movement in this country, because Trayvon Martin was murdered inside of a Florida gated community. So there's all of these sort of kind of sinister edges. I don't know how much longer Longboat Key is going to be around. I'm saying this as someone who also has, my work and my partner Dan Paz's work is very much like also thinking about this place because my mother lives there and I obsessively photograph her. And before my father died, I also photographed him in Florida. So it has like a kind of resonant, in his community garden where he grew vegetables in Sarasota, which is a 40-minute drive from Longboat Key. So I also feel this sort of tug here. So I would love to hear you like kind of explain Florida through your eyes and through these photographs, and how you wrestle with that sort of the tensions that come up with this place in this specific time too, where like Ron DeSantis is governor, and there's all this anti-trans and queer legislation kind of coming out of there as well, not to mention ICE warehouses and more prisons. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my father was coming to this island actually with my mother when they were still married ever since I was born, and they considered it a home even before they lived there. And they bought a home, I think, when the home, not my mother, but my stepfather, my mother and my father and my stepmother bought a home when their home was sort of the height of the luxury on the island. And since then, their home is considered to be almost upper middle class, which is so wild because there are so many other buildings that just are ascending and ascending and ascending and ascending, and the island cannot handle the population, especially with the very real onslaught of the hurricanes that hit it every single year. There are only two bridges that leave this island. And so if there's ever an evacuation needed, it's logistically impossible for people to leave. My father would never leave when a hurricane came. It was because it was impossible. And because he had this sort of strange, unwavering faith that the home that he had would withstand any hurricane, for some reason, it was completely a misled logic, but that's just how he felt. He thought that the glass in the windows were thick enough, that the second floor would stave off any kind of flooding, because there was an apartment underneath. So, too bad for them, he would always say. And and he also felt that he was safe, so to speak, within this gated community, right? That he had this fear, right, as so many do, of this, and he had this imagined fear of this, not this imagined fear, but this this idea that there was going to be a classed or racialized impact, like a kind of theft in his house, right? And it always made me think of his home as a kind of fish tank, that he felt that his house would protect him from anything, any kind of transgression on his way of life, right? Even politically speaking, somebody like Ron DeSantis, who he hated, would never impact him because his home would protect him. His home would keep him safe. And, in some ways, I always felt that this was a way for him to, and a way for so many people on the island and in the area, because I think that so many people have this idea about the gated communities and their homes and the way that they protect themselves and their wealth, that this is just a way to protect themselves from the very natural reality of dying. That if you can keep your possessions founded and safe within a place, and that if you have the right security guard, and if you can surround yourself with the neighbors that you deem live in the lifestyle that you want to live in, perhaps you will never die.
How did that work out?
I mean, it didn't work out, but it was actually a funny thing. He was very lucky. He actually left Longboat Key. It was unsustainable. It is unsustainable.
Yeah.
First of all, but it was unsustainable for him to be by himself without family in this place. His wife died. My stepmother eventually died while I was making this work. She died of early onset Alzheimer's, which is very much in the narrative of the images. And when he sold the house and moved out, 2 hurricanes hit Longboat Key in
Wow.
the span of 1 week and decimated the island completely.
So he knew to leave, but also it was time to go. And thank you for sharing that about your stepmother. And also, I didn't mean to make light of, how did the gated community work out in terms of the longevity. But because there is, I think, a very honest, and I think there's this, the Florida photos, like the beautiful beach one that I'm looking at right over here. And then even the dying palm frond, the ones that are sort of, and there's birds, there's actual birds over there. I don't know if they're flamingos or egrets laying down.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's supposed to be a little mysterious to the non-birder, tropical birder. But there's a sort of, there's a real I think, environment of mourning and loss and like, this, it just like there's a rupture, not a rapture, a rupture. Sorry. It's just that, the space is filled with a lot of Christian Zionist fervor right now. So I think it's important to call it out. And anyway, yeah, Florida it's terrifying. I mean, I remember even like every time there's a hurricane season, my mom, who lives in a house that my parents, got together about 10 years ago, moving from New Jersey on mainland, she brags that they're not in a gated community and thinks it's unnecessary, but it's right next to a gated community, and all these little developments in Sarasota mainland, are also like they're so carbon copies of one another, and it's like extreme hyper development for people that are like working from home or retiring down there because of the it's less taxes and the cost of living is cheaper. But there's something that I feel like with these photos where, all right, I'm going back to that you're like not afraid of death. You're open to it because it's not just like, you're sort of like, what are the opportunities in our life cycles? And there's something like, you shared some really personal information. And when we were thinking about how to frame this, like, I think a lot of times in photography, when we get access to really, or photographers get access to really intimate places that feel like, a revelation to be welcomed into this very intimate space of caretaking within your family. But I feel like what you're doing in positioning these other photos of Florida and the place, the aquariums, the beaches, the shells, the birds, the figurines wrapped in plastic around the Christmas time, Jesus stuff, and which is all over Florida. And actually, yeah, my mom's friend does advocacy in her community to try to like reduce the amount of like Christianity paraphernalia that erupts because she feels like it's like not fair to her as a Jew.
Yes.
Anyway, so it is a thing. It's like a thing in Florida, those statues wrapped in plastic. It's like, yep. And everyone in my mom's community, I'm on a roll with this. One thing, puts a Santa hat on everyone's mailbox. And then it gets wet too, and it rains. It's like it's so irritating.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
It's like absolutely, it is irritating.
You're doing anyway. So I don't really care as much as getting on like going to meetings about it, but someone out there is. Anyway,
it's important work.
But I think like we talked about like this thing where you're like you're not in the gated community denial of death and like sort of surrounding yourself by luxury items and some like kind of like this is the way to be, is to like adorn ourselves with, Rolexes or whatever, since we're, and there's something open about that. Like, I think what we talked about is like the protagonist of this is like mourning and loss as like okay, and also like present. Like, we are living through a time where like expendable extrajudicial death is just, it's like increasing by the day. Like, what is humanity's threshold to just witness this, experience it, and thinking about like, I think coming in here, I felt like, the wavelength that I'm on thinking about the genocide in Palestine is very resonant with this sort of being in this liminal space in your family where it is clear that it's like the end of some people's lives and then the beginning of others, right? And I think there's a lot of also like transy self-portraiture in here where it's like not. And so there's this open space with death where you're kind of like offering us, like, you're like, look, Florida is sinking. Hurricanes are everywhere, is experiencing climate catastrophe. Like, it's coming for everyone, even if they think they're in their bunker, even though Longboat Key is a terrible bunker.
It is. It's the worst one you could pick.
I just think I'm talking too much, but just a little bit more about like, what do you think of this, like, this exhibition and this project is like very, like, kind of candidly about death and dying and like, yeah. And that's a very photography kind of topic too. It's the question in our notes was, what's up with photography and death? So if you want to just take it from there, Alana.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing that I was when I was making the work, it took a and you were asking about the transy self portraits.
Yes.
Something that I was thinking a lot about when I was making this was in the early stages is that I wasn't contending so much with the implications of my own death and my own role in this world. I really thought of myself as someone that was constantly visiting, and I wasn't responsible necessarily for the people or for my impact on the island. And in that way, I was wondering if the the camera itself was my aquarium, right? If it was sort of my protection, if I was hiding within the camera. So I tried to, in making the pictures of myself, and I had never had a self-portrait practice before this project, I was trying to make the camera a little bit more of a leaky vessel. So, with the aquarium thing. uh, in order to ask myself the same sorts of existential questions that I was trying to ask of my family and of the other objects and creatures that I was photographing. The question of death and the presence of death has that's always been a very open topic of conversation in the home that I was photographing in. My family communicates with ghosts. I don't really have that gift, but my father did, and my stepmother did. My sister does in a sort of way, and so does my niece. And the way that I began trying to make pictures was an effort at a sort of spectral correspondence with the ghosts that were inhabiting the house. And at first, the ghosts really felt like the actual people that they described as knowing who were as knowing basically the Grandma Tilly or Grandma Nina or John and my dad's old friend and other folks that were in and around that would come with them apparently from home to home. I don't know how that works. I don't know how ghosts move from home to home when people travel and move, but apparently they did. Uh, and in this practice of trying to figure out where people occupied themselves in the room, I was becoming more and more attuned to perhaps where ghosts could be in and around the island. And that family that I was photographing became larger and larger and larger. And I mean, I've been talking about family that extends beyond the biological family, but so I also, so I mean that too, but also family that, or just communities within the island that I've never met or would never meet or would never understand, perhaps because of the violences of colonialism, and also families that extend far beyond the island. I mean, the island is a sort of migratory place, right? Not only because of the people that come and go. I mean, they're known as snowbirds, right? It's a they come for the
There's more
winter.
traffic when the snowbirds come to Florida.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But also, so in this way that ghosts travel, I wonder about ghosts. Like, how can ghosts come from the north of the U.S.? How could they come from Sicily, right, where my father's family is from? Could they possibly be coming from anywhere in the world? How ancestral does it get? Does it get ancestral to the point where we've never been related in any kind of biological sense?
And that to me is like trying to approach a heavily colonized place from like okay, I've read decolonial thought and analysis, and I want to try to like not just think of the narrow human relations or my lawn that I'm, you know, watering with the timers. You know, it's more like a, well, what is beyond the bounds or the 7 generations, and like a thinking like back 7 generations and 7 generations forward, and like more indigenous relationships to land, trying to like take cues from them in some ways. That's really amazing to hear. And it's very expansive, but you also have a sense of humor with this work. And we wanted to, I wanted to ask you to demystify the title. So now that you can see, or perhaps are hearing about these photographs that are, it's titled Gesundheit, Pictures of Birds. However, they're not all, so are they all pictures of birds? Can you please just tell us where you're going with this title?
Yeah, absolutely. So the title comes from something that I heard very often in my home when I was making the work. When I first started, my stepmother was very much losing her memory and would say this to me all the time. She would suggest when I was photographing, especially when I was photographing things that she didn't understand, when I was photographing corners of rooms, when I was photographing dead flowers, when I was photographing palm fronds on the lanai, she would ask, why don't I make pictures of birds, because there are so many beautiful birds on the island. The island is really known for the incredible array of migratory species that come down. It's not a bird sanctuary, but people come in, they flock in from all over to see them and to photograph them. And honestly, bird photography is a huge business on
long lenses.
Long lenses,
Yeah.
yes, exactly.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think that this question of like birds, like you do have like you are thinking of snowbirds,
yes,
basically. Like
yes.
That's the joke there is like, and it's also like, to take the quote, why don't you just take pictures of birds? It's like, well, you do that too. And, you know, there is a bird that appears more than once whose name is Samuel, who's right by behind Michael's head. Sorry.
Yes.
Who's near you too. It's nice that your father is sort of like on both sides of your sight lines.
But I didn't photograph birds for a very long time because
you wanted to be a rebel to the
I
prompt.
did. Yes. Yeah. I was, it seemed too easy. And so it was a challenge to not photograph birds. And because I was not photographing birds, it was a rule. It was a rule to never photograph a bird.
Interesting.
And I think in this way that I was never photographing a bird, everything became a bird. Because I was constantly thinking, not a bird, not a bird, not a bird.
It's a good aphorism. Easy to remember.
Yes, yes. It was almost like a visual echolalia, because she always said it. Why don't you take pictures of birds? Why don't you take pictures of birds? So I would go out and make pictures, and it was always on my mind. Why don't you take pictures of birds? Why don't you take pictures of birds?
And then the ones that do appear, I think there is something sort of like not at face value about them, and you're sort of playing with that. So that's cool. Well, what is it like to be photographed by you? When you got that line, like, why don't you take pictures of birds? Were you using large cameras, or, you know, I know this is an Aperture event and a Leica event. We're inside a camera store. Leicas have a very specific also relationship to the history of photography, especially street photography. So I would love for you to go down the gearhead, because we always get everyone wants to know. I want to know. I already know because we talked earlier, but tell, what cameras do you use? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not very camera specific. I used I think 5 cameras. I was trying to remember how many cameras I used to make this, and I think we spoke about 4, and then I remembered a 5th. I used about 5 cameras to make this work. I, 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 I'm not attached to any specific camera. For me, I'm always trying to find this very fine line between accessibility and avoiding physical pain. I don't want it to be easy to make a picture. I want there to be a struggle. I want there to be a physical struggle in making the image.
It's an event.
It's an event.
Yeah.
It is very much an event. And people that I photograph, they know that it's an event. It takes a long time. Because of this, I rarely photograph people that I don't know. This is changing a little bit now, but it takes a long time. It takes a very long time. Sometimes it can take hours, but not always. And so I've used for this 4x5, 8x10, 2 medium formats, a waterproof point and shoot.
That was the new one you didn't remember?
No, the 8x10 I didn't remember.
Oh, wow, 8x10.
Yeah, I did use an 8x10.
So that's like a very large, cumbersome
Yes,
camera. That's the size of the negative,
yes,
just to translate.
That
Yeah.
was my least favorite one.
Surprise, surprise.
That was literally awful. I used that one visit and I said never again.
But you got an exposure.
I did. I got many, but never again.
So large format, medium format, and you also mentioned that there are digital cameras in the mix as well.
Yeah,
You're
there's
not
one.
an analog head.
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm really not. I enjoy the film because I enjoy thinking about the process. I enjoy the process of the insertion of the film and the way that there's just one negative. I love negatives. I'm not an analog head, but I am a little bit of a collector of antique images, and there's something about the negative that brings me into that historicity, that makes the moment feel so much more, I don't want to say profound, but I do want to say difficult. I do like it when the moment is harder. I don't like it when it's easy to make a picture. If it's easy to make a picture, I'll never make a good picture.
Well, that's really interesting. I like that. If it's easy, that seems like a good, almost like bumper sticker. I've been seeing a lot of artsy bumper stickers these days. So, yeah. But that's really, I mean, that you're trying to also draw attention to the camera and the process, and it also like you want to be called to order by the materials and the equipment and the history of these materials. Like earlier, you mentioned that that you've been working with a printer that also does photogravure. Sorry, it sounds. Which I know also is like an olden process, like more like early 20th century process, and was used in newspaper reproduction type. So it's more kind of like using a plate, a copper plate, and then doing it in a way that's like also for mass reproduction. Like it's not like the daguerreotype where it's like like the Polaroid of historical photography. So that, I mean, I think also we can't see your camera setup in these images, so it's important to call it into to how we understand the sort of particular configurations of what made these photographs possible, because it's very specific decisions when you decide to haul out an 8x10, a 4x5, a medium format cameras. Any 35 millimeter? No.
No,
Then just the
the waterproof point and
Waterproof?
shoot,
point and shoot. So would be a 35
I suppose.
or digital.
But it's digital.
Never mind. I don't think digital has the millimeters. It's all about the what's it called?
The pixel.
Pixels?
The
Pixels, and also the image sensor, anyway. Well, what do you think about asking the audience if they have any questions for you, since we've been chatting
Yeah.
for a while?
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, front row.
Say a little more about who Samuel is.
Okay.
bird? Yeah.
We have a question about who Samuel the bird is.
So Samuel the bird was a compromise, but also a gift, a strange gift. My dad did not like gifts because he didn't really know what to do with them, and he loved birds, he loved fish. He used to keep them when he was younger, and when he retired, he always said that he wanted them, and I bought him this bird, and he didn't get to keep it. He didn't really know what to do with the bird. He had it for a little bit and then gave it right back to me.
Do you have it?
I have the bird.
Okay.
It is a pigeon. It is a very, very big pigeon. Those pigeons, they were bred. I'm forgetting the exact species, but those pigeons they were bred to eat. That's why it's so big. Yeah, it's not like the pigeons that big bird. Yeah, but I wanted to name the bird after an angel, because angels were another entity that I also was always imagining that I was photographing when I was outside. Angels were some of the creatures, the people that lived in the house and that my stepmother used to look for and think about, and she would say that her mother was an angel and that her and so Samuel.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
You said that the project started by photographing your father because you always thought that you would put him who looks like you. But I've noticed there are no clear pictures of your father in this work.
Mm.
So always either looking away or obscured by the shower door, or otherwise hidden in some way. And I never made that connection that he looks like you really like him because he's always there's no clear picture of his face, I guess. Just wondering why. I wonder if you speak about why you chose to obscure leave that connection out when it started the project.
Yes, absolutely.
Can we repeat the question?
Oh yes. So why? So okay. Repeat the question. Why
I can do
are
it if you want.
you want to?
Why are photographs of your father, why is his face obscured either by steam or the glass, or he's looking down?
Yeah.
There was more.
Basically, you said that the resemblance between you and him inspired it.
Mm-hmm.
So why is that resemblance left out? Why do you let it out of the final body of work?
And the photographs of him are engaging in this dialogue of mirroring and resemblance. So why do we not have a more literal, clear frontal image? Yeah. Okay.
I think that, much of it is instinctual. I'm not purposefully obscuring the faces when I'm working, but I think that the instinct behind it really is to make the face, or to make the body or the limbs or the gestures as comparable as possible. So if I see my father straight on in full detail, we didn't look alike. He was too old. He was, I mean, he was 89 when he died. And I mean, it's really in the fleeting moments when I see our resemblances. It's not even always in the physicality. Sometimes it's just when he's angry, or when he's scared, or when I see him walk from the kitchen to the bathroom. So it's not even a kind of taxonomy of features. It's so much more vague and indescribable. So when I photograph the people and things in general, I want that vagueness so that the comparisons are easily found and that they reflect what I experience when I see them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. What was your father's relationship to being Italian American?
Yes.
Because I'm feeling that really like vibrating across these. I'm a Barbacallo, so I like.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but like I'm seeing something there when you mentioned Sicily. I just wondered.
Yes, it was so important to him. It was incredibly
What was
important.
the Italian American-ness of your father? How is that present in the work? It's for the recording.
Sometimes I think that being Italian was more important to him than being Catholic. He was Catholic. I'm not Catholic. I'm Jewish. I was raised Jewish. My mother's Jewish, and that was their decision. Again, because being Catholic was not important to him. And in the family, again, they were Catholic, but to me, the things that were important to them were Italian. Specifically, they were actually Sicilian. And the Sicilians consider themselves to be specifically often not Italian. Longer story there. But all of the traditions, even ones that are around things that we might think of as Catholicisms, are inherently actually Sicilian. And come from traditions that are much more Greek, and actually, if you really look into the traditions, they're also Arab. So, to me, that was also really important in making the work, was these relationships between rituals, rituals in the home, and rituals of mourning. That, like, certainly Catholicism influenced the family and influenced it for generations to come, but not generations previously. And the things that they spoke about, what their fathers did and their mothers did and their grandparents did, etc., those things were just so much more steeped in superstition.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things that I carry with me. And they're actually things that I also find to be remarkably Jewish at times. So I always found that to be incredibly relatable, even though we had such different religions. Yeah. Thank you.
I saw some questions in the back. Does anybody want to? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is a bit about the installation and the presentation of the photos. And there's obviously a variety of framing and size and color, black and white. How do you approach it for each installation or each place? I mean, are there certain photos that have to be in this, and are there others that can come and go and you replace images in other versions of the show?
Yeah, absolutely. The question was about installation and installation choices, the framing, not framing, black and white versus color. So I approach each space differently. there's often pictures that I use as an anchor for the same exhibitions, but something that I tend to always do, and particularly with this body of work, is to have the different sizes and the different heights. I don't always have different framing styles where some are framed and some are pinned, but the methodology behind the differences is to call attention to a consistency of change for height, an exchange between celestial and terrestrial, and for the color, a difference between reality and dreamscape. Sometimes choosing a more documentary image to be in color and a more illusory image to be black and white, which might be a little bit contradictory. And for the framing, to think about the difference between captivity and expansiveness. But this notion that these elements are always in flux, and that with the hope that the viewer has an experience perhaps being inside the world looking in, and the opposite. Inside the world looking in and outside as well. Wait, inside the world looking out? Sorry.
I think we got it.
You got it, thank you. And also that every image perhaps is a portal to another image.
And I think just to jump on that, like the photo of the corals at the aquarium or the shark at the aquarium, like I feel like you're very, well, this one we can see that it's an edge of a tank. And there's also like you show the construction of space, the framing of space, the beautification of like a tended lawn. You know, I feel like you show the artifice of it as part of like everything is being framed, like whether there's a frame around it or not, kind of. But I think that it's really dynamic to have color, black and white, framed, unframed, heights, not, and it's cool to come in, you know, through the store where even just from where I'm sitting, and we talked about this, in the side of the store that is currently selling really nice cameras, there are frames that are of photographs also, just as a contrast, but are basically at, you know, the eye level, at whatever it is, 67 inches up from the ground, or, you know, when they install, it's like on a straight line. So there's this kind of fun interplay also between being inside the gallery and the way the installation is outside as well. So there were more questions. I don't know if you're like, no, I never had a question. Yeah, did you?
No, it was answered with this.
Oh, okay. Okay, that was actually one of the questions on my list I didn't get to, so thank you for bringing it into the room. Other questions? I saw, yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to regulate this, I guess. I know we talked a lot about Alzheimer's and aging and death, but I was also, there are lots of things going on about bodies, and there's like an accessibility tool that's done like pretty largely. And even just, I think disability and photo making are so linked. It's even when you get to like why being torturous to use an 8x10, like I can't use one, and I won't use one. It hurts. And I guess I was wondering, like what role, or like if you're thinking about disability more directly in terms of even like caretaking and how we structure space, or like why living in a gated community is often helpful for disability in some ways and stuff like that. So I was wondering if you had thoughts on that.
Yeah.
So the question is, thank you for that question, about like, specifically in this photo, there's a large accessibility device, and like, what is the role of disability in making the work, and also like what you're communicating when you present it as well.
I think just like disability outside of like aging and death.
Yes, disability, aging, and death.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I don't always get asked that question. So, yes, when I was when I was working on this chair was put in, and I used it quite often. I used it quite often because I have a dynamic disability and my knees often hurt. And it was actually something that I didn't tell my dad. I kept it a secret because I didn't want to upset him. You know, the truth is that we're all going to be disabled at some point in our lives. People think that it only happens when you turn 88 or 72, but at some point, everyone is going to experience disability. And, you know, in terms of all of my cameras, the 8x10 down to the point and shoot, the reason that I use so many cameras is because I can't always use an 8x10 or a 4x5. Sometimes it hurts too much, and so I have to use the point and shoot. And when I'm working, I'm often working in this threshold between difficulty and pain. And that's what I'm always trying to tread. When does it hurt versus when am I uncomfortable? And I think that that's the reality for so many people. And it's the reality for the elderly, certainly, but also it's the reality for a lot of young people. And it's often invisible. And it's kind of an underlying theme in the work, as is queerness, which we were talking about just a little bit, with the self-portraits being a little bit transy. But yeah, how does the body change and decay, and how can we love it and care for it still, even when it's not as perfect and beautiful? How do we mourn for it, right? And how can we simultaneously feel joy and grief? And how can we still make beautiful things and love? You know, yeah. I think like there's this saying about, I think, grief that I hear a lot. I don't know, that we feel grief because we loved so much. That's kind of beautiful. And I sometimes feel that way about my father, certainly, and my stepmother, and also about my body, which is hurting more than it should as a 36-year-old.
Well, I think that's a really beautiful place to end, and encourage you to come look at the portfolio. Do you want to end now? Do
Yeah,
you feel like that's
sounds
good?
great.
Okay, I didn't get your thoughts on that. I really encourage people to spend time with the portfolio of prints, and also chat with Alana, chat with each other. I want to give a little special thank you to former students of mine who came that I haven't necessarily seen in a while. I'm happy to see you all here, and everyone else who's here as well. So thank you, Alana, for this really incredible conversation. We were recording, and I can't wait to see where your work goes moving forward.
Thank you so much, Ariel. Thank you for being here. Thank you all for being here today. So streamy. Thank you.
Thank you too.